Welcome to Horsin Around, the show that casts our eyes and yours across everything equestrian in Ireland. Later in the show, we'll be getting some sound veterinary advice, catching up with Olympic hero Keno Connor, finding out why the horse makes the perfect picture, and cruising in to see an old champion. But first to a champion of a more recent vintage. Last year, Paul Beecher won the Hickstead Derby on Loch Natusa WB, an amazing result for horse sport in Ireland. We caught up with Paul and his family.
You could put it up, Paul. This is a 4-year-old we've just broken. He's by Cranna Hero. I'd be very, very happy with that because it's his first time through a double. He seems a very nice, straightforward horse with a nice brain.
And what you see us doing here is how all our young horses start off with. We break them and they start off loose jumping, and then we assess them as how they jump. Like I say, it's nice for them in their own environment to trot loose, and then they get a feel for it themselves and how to do it and how to judge a fence. And when they start here, especially for the eventing and the show jumping and racing, it's like they learn how to find their own balance and their own footing in front of a fence. And they do it naturally, and they learn themselves how to jump rather than depending on the rider all the time, you know. We trot them left-handed, so they trot over the trotting pole, and then we have a pole in the middle that they bounce and jump out, and then we leave them go right-handed where they canter, and then they canter back over it, and again they land in, bounce and jump out, and find this pole coming out. The trotting pole in canter is a great pole for them because it teaches them to land and take the first stride naturally, rather than some horses land in a bit of a heap, or some horses over jump and land too far out of balance, whereas this educates them to land and take the first stride and they're back in a nice balance again. Just the difference between him and the last horse is he's a little bit more backward and a bit greener. That's why we won't finish off on a square ox, or just leave him educate coming through in the sloping, and then over the next couple of days he'll pick up on it. We do a lot of pre-train on race horses for the loose jumping, which is stands to them no end, because like when a horse is fresh they're going to jump flamboyant anyway, but I mean it's when they get tired, and especially in the race horses towards the end of a race when they get tired, that's when they really need to understand how to jump, and that's with the loose jumping that they'll always find another leg, or they'll understand how to stay up on their feet. So as you can see just from the 2 horses we've jumped there this morning, you can nearly even see already the benefit of it is.
Basically, the loose schooling end of it, where you start them off very quietly on low flat fence. And basically what you're working on is teach them to be comfortable when they land. Teach them how to land is the main thing. Then they get confidence. Then they start jumping. And we're very old-fashioned with the young horses because I don't agree with all these young event horse classes and all this wind up of the young horses. I think they should be allowed to develop. Grow their bone instead of growing splints and cobs and hooky hocks and all the rest of it. It's now like they're 4.5 now, going 5. It's now that they'll fiddle away for the winter, and the Paul is first whip here with the West Waterfords, and the boys and local lads, they'll all get hunted for the winter and fiddled along. But
the earliest memory I have was sitting on a horse in front of my father. It must have been back when I was about 1.5 years or 2 even. It was like you could practically say I've been raised on a horse here at home. Every time my father used to go out checking the land and checking everything, he's always sit me in front of him, and it was from there I started. My pony career took off fast and furious. I was 7 years of age when I qualified for the Dublin Horse Show and created the record of being the youngest rider ever to compete there, with a very, very good pony, Loch Natusa champ, and he actually won a qualifier for Dublin, and then he qualified for the final in the main arena, and he actually jumped clear in the final, except the combination was running underneath the rider stand, and as he jumped in he popped me off and then continued on himself and jumped through it. So I mean, that'll just tell you how good a pony he was.
And your old mare, he scanned and foaled the other day, didn't he?
Yeah.
That'd be a nice cross with the Spring Diamond and the Simple Clover.
The only problem is she'll run late.
I know, but sure, beggars can't be choosers.
This would be, I suppose in human terms, would be a nephew of WB. He's out of the full sister, which is grazing quite content over the far side. He's by Clover Brigade. He's a very nice foal actually. He's very correct and stands well. And we're very fortunate and lucky to have WB's sister in our breeding programme. I mean, there again to my father, he chose to keep her to breed off because WB showed so much ability as a young horse, and I think that's what he's done with a lot of our good mares. Is he's bred from them and kept their offspring to breed from, and that's what's it's a credit to him for what he's done for us here.
Well, basically, I just thought that the whole world was going continental and warm blood. And because I was lucky enough to have the land here, we just kind of started off with a few mares, and then, you know, I'd pick out other mares, and I went to a few of the studs that had very nice thoroughbred mares that were a bit too small to race, with nice pedigrees. I bought them and crossed them with the draft, and I found it a very good cross, because we've always tried to work here for the amateur rider. And then, like, if the like of WBs and these come along, it's fantastic. He's the cream.
I always just like to put a small little bit of Vaseline on the corners of the mouths before they ride. It's not that they have sore mouths, but it just keeps the mouths nice and soft from where the bit sits and all the time. And I think it's just generates really from the young horses when they first get a bit put in their mouth, because their mouths have never had a bit in there, and it sometimes often pinches and breaks their gums and gives them a sore mouth. And I think with young horses it's vitally important to keep plenty of Vaseline on their mouths so that they don't become afraid of the bit. And I think it's just become a habit now that every horse I have, I always just put a little bit on their mouths before they work. Just any time I work in here on the flat, I kind of always just work my flat work as if I'm on a course of fences, and it's always nice to have some poles on the floor that you can just come around and just leave them work their own stride over it. And I always try and do as much circles as I can, because it's like in the arena you're going to be rolling back onto a fence. You always just try and get them that they're coming around your inside leg, and then that you can just change them and they go on to the other rein. Because I think it's very important, and for me as a rider doing flat work, I try and ride my flat work that I'm in the arena all the time, so I'm working on turnbacks and the flying changes. I always try and imagine that I'm on a dog leg, that when I want the flying change I get it, because I think sometimes you can fall into false pretense on the flat by just cantering circles and trotting circles and doing fancy flying changes, but then when you're actually in the arena, then your horse isn't listening to you properly, and then you get caught out in the distance, or you get caught out in the dog leg where a flying change is needed and you don't get it, and then before you know it the fence is on top of you. So I just find working on the flat, I'm always just working as if I'm in the arena and just cantering over imaginary fences as I'm going around. I think it's important not to change your canter balance from what you do in the flat to when you do jumping. So just coming to the fence here and just keeping it straight. It's a nice easy stride coming up. Jumped really well. And then just to balance them up in the corner again. So again, the same canter, just keep them around my inside leg here. There's a nice stride waiting again. Just wait, good, balance, and just wait again, nice and steady. Very good. And again, just balance again. Horse is happy. I always like to just jump fences that height with these horses, because I always believe if you have your horse concentrating on a small fence, it shouldn't be a problem to get him concentrating on a big fence. So he's happy and he's jumping well and he's in good form. I just get that once more, I can just kind of use the corner a bit more up on top, that he comes around the corner and he's straighter. You'll get a much better shot at the fence then, I think. Ambition at the moment is leading that I've a very nice young stock of horses coming through, but like I say, the problem with these horses for me as a rider is I'm going to produce them and sell them, because I can't afford to keep them, and it would be absolutely fantastic if I could come across some good owners that would be happy to back me with some good jumping horses, and maybe sponsors come on board as well to help me through the business I have here. And that would be a huge help if I could get that, because in the end of the day, you can only do top level show jumping if you have someone strong behind you to back you and help you. I met a lot of people and I thought this is going to be a very good night here, and I was on the street and next minute I walked in and there was over 500 people in there, and it just blew me away how it touched so many different people. Like, I mean, even after the night when I was meeting people afterwards and I was talking between farmers, business people, people that travelled afar, and I couldn't get over how touched it was for them. They all had the memories of Paul and Eddie Mack and the Harvey Smiths. It's one class in show jumping that has stood out to everybody, and I think it touched an awful lot of people, and that blew me away. Is this success I got that touched so many different people, because I know for ourselves it was an unbelievable achievement, but I was, like I said, the only word I could say, I was blown away with the homecoming I got for it, because, like, I mean, everyone was so supportive, and with cards being sent to me, radio stations ringing me, and I realised that's when I think it really sunk into me that I'd won the Hickstead Derby and I'd made it at the level of show jumping that it is.
Colic is abdominal pain in a horse, and this can be a sort of like a mild gut spasm which is producing a mild bellyache, or it can be something more serious like an impaction of food material, or it could be something even more serious like a bad twist of an intestine or something like that. The signs of colic are a horse going off their food, and they may be pawing the ground, they may be trying to roll, they may be sweating up, and sometimes they're in incredible distress and you cannot stand them back up again because they're so painful. They're rolling around with the legs up in the air. Those are the most severe types of colic. What do you do if your horse gets colic? If the signs of colic persist for more than 10 or 15, 20 minutes, then you need to call your veterinary surgeon. And the veterinary surgeon will administer a drug, he'll administer a painkiller or a sedative or a spasmolytic, something to reduce the spasm of the intestine, to relax the intestine. And that should relieve the signs of the colic in most instances. If the colic is not relieved by the initial injections that your veterinary surgeon gives, then you may be unlucky. You may be that 1 in 20 colic episodes that requires more detailed investigation and treatment in an equine hospital.
Coming up after the break, we call in on two of Ireland's favourite champions, and we'll be finding out why a horse can be just as beautiful still as in motion. Welcome back to Horsin' Around. We have a rare treat for you now as we catch up with one of the country's all-time favourites, the inimitable and irrepressible Cruising.
Down here. Hey, Crew. And Cruising's in the stable he was born in, and I would say he'd very much like to die in here as well. So I suppose we'll have to give him that. Good boy. Cruising is an original Irish sport horse, bred the old traditional way. He's out of a very near thoroughbred mare who was Mulla Crew, who was jumped by the army. She jumped for Ireland on many occasions. And he's by the Irish draft horse Seacrest, who himself was a grade A show jumper in his own right. In the beginning, like all young horses, Cruising at the age of 2 was a very loud-spoken, if you like, young horse. He was beginning to look at mares, and he was beginning to annoy me because all he could do was shout. And I was getting fed up with all these whinnies every time he saw horses going around the yard and going near him. So I actually said to Edward Doyle, who was here at the time, I was going on holidays, and I said to him, I think you better see, does this horse jump? Because if he doesn't jump, I think we castrate him and he'd just be a gelding. So having spent a couple of days sort of teaching him to lunge, Edward came up and said, I think you better come down and see this. And I have to say, from the first 2 fences that we saw him jump, and they were only a foot high, we realised we had something. Cruising started his show jumping career. Basically, he was jumped as a 4-year-old here by Edward Doyle, and then he went on to the late Paul Darragh, and Paul Darragh jumped him, I think, for 2 seasons in the usual novice classes here in Ireland. And he probably, one of his best classes at that stage was to win what was known as then as the Guinness 5-year-old Young Horse Championships in Dublin, where he was remarkable actually. He had jumped in very few shows, and he went straight to Dublin. He jumped 3 very brilliantly rounds. This is Seacrest, Cruising's father, who's a famous Irish draft. And then we go to Cruising as a foal, and this was a famous photograph taken for advertising the horse show on the Farmer's Journal, and it's of Seacrest written by Edward Doyle, and then we have Nadia Cook, who managed the mares in Hartwell, and then we have Cruising's mother, Mullicrew, and Cruising as a foal, and as you can see, a very funny colour, as all greys are not born the colour they end up. And then we go on a bit further, and Cruising went on to his show jumping career with Trevor Coyle, and I like that photograph. It's a lovely photograph of them exercising, obviously, before they go in to jump. This is probably one of my favourite photographs. It's a photograph of Cruising coming out of the famous Aachen horse show in Germany, where he had just won the Grand Prix. And then, of course, he was in on a lot of teams. He jumped in Calgary and all over Europe, and in Pavarotti's show. And this is a famous one of them parading, having won the Aga Khan Trophy in Dublin. I think Cruising won it 3 times. I'm going to show you now a granddaughter of Cruising's, born last night. And this is a mare by Cruising, out of the good show jumping, or the good eventing mare. She's a full sister to the first mate, and this is her daughter, born last night, first foal by Clover Brigade. We'll see, can we get her up now for you? Oh, Patty, it's all right, good girl. You're going to get up, babe. Come on, up. Come on, get up to be late. There you are. Cruising covered mares when he was 3, and of the 9 he covered, I think 4, maybe 5 of them went international. So, you know, he came on the scene quite quickly, and we knew that he was good, and we knew what he was breeding well. By the time he was, let's say, 9, he actually had sons and daughters that were jumping at the novice level and showing that they had a lot of ability. He now is the 3rd leading star eventing, never mind 3-day eventing, never mind the show jumpers. But probably the one that is most known is Flexible. Cruising's 27 years old now, but he's in good form and doesn't really look his age. I think he'd like to be young again and going out and jumping at these international shows if he could.
Cruising showing there that he's lost none of the personality that made him such a success in competition. We turn our attention now, though, to a hero of more recent times, Olympic bronze medalist Keno Connor.
Started riding when I was 14 and I started competing when I was 16, so quite late I think. I suppose a lot of people would have ridden ponies, which I never did. Winning the Puissance in Dublin in 2002 in the RDS on Casper when I was last to go was really a highlight when I look back on it. I was last into the ring, a packed crowd that day in the RDS, and Casper jumped 2.25 meters like it was 3-foot fence. And I look back on that horse as one of the fantastic horses that I've ridden. But it's important that they have a good brain, and that's something very hard to try a horse for when you test a horse out over one afternoon to see how clever it is. And I suppose, how would I define cleverness in a horse? It's something you feel, so you learn with experience. Unfortunately, we all have bought a few horses that didn't work, and we thought we were going to turn them into superstars. So as you make mistakes and gain experience, you learn what to look for in a good horse. But the fundamental thing is attitude and intelligence. Best advice I've ever been offered, I suppose, was probably by Jerry Mullins early in my career, when he said work harder than the rest, be 10 minutes earlier than the rest and 10 minutes later, to try and stand out from the crowd. There's a lot of guys who are mediocre, but mediocre is not good enough. If you want to get ahead, you got to go the extra mile. That's something that I try to do anyway. Maybe I'd do something, I don't know, with law. I wanted to go to law school when I was finished in Belvedere, but I took a year out to ride horses, so we never got back to it. I have a good interest in the law and I'm quite a good debater, so maybe something like that would have suited me as well. Rory McIlroy. I'd love to have his money. My greatest achievement to date was definitely winning the bronze medal at the Olympics in London in 2012. It's the Olympic Games is where it's at in all sports. It's the pinnacle, and Ireland has never won an equestrian medal before. So to be the first to do so, given all the greats that have gone before me, is certainly a very happy personal achievement. Success is reward for effort.
And lastly, do you have one word to describe yourself?
Determined.
Many of you will no doubt be more familiar with our next guest's work rather than his name. We caught up with Keno Connor to find out why he finds fascination in its stillest and most enduring form.
I think I was drawn to horses because it's naturally in my blood to do something with horses. It's in our family. Coming from a long line of blacksmiths that have worked with horses, I think there's just something in me that I had no other choice but to work with horses. They're amazing animals. They're just so powerful and so gentle and just so majestic. As you can see there, they don't really stand still for too long, so you kind of have to be fast, but all you need to get is just one line, maybe 2 lines, and you can bring that back to your studio then and work from there. You know, but it's important that you get practice from drawing from life as well. You know, it's good to get out, get the hands numb and get drawing from life. You can really get a feel for the animal then. It'd be nicer if they came closer. I'm just looking to get the line of the back gone into the neck and shoulders area because I want to do a large painting. Just concentrate solely, you just see the line of the back, the rest is going to be in darkness, and I just want to get maybe a big 6 foot or 7 foot painting done. If one of them would straighten their neck now for me. There we go. Well, I think that was pretty up close and personal, so might just go back to the studio and get something on canvas or start out a commission piece or something like that. I think it's a good morning's work.
So that's it from Horsin' Around. We'll be back with much more next time. Until then, take care and thanks for watching.